earlier, Eidolon of the Great Rebel, a card that didn't seem very good game one in this matchup, and we actually thought they should board it out. I don't think he ended up boarding out in that matchup, so we'll see how this one goes. But it looks like Red White Burn is going to be on the draw.
And it seems like Eidolon is really, really good turn 2 on the play, and that's really about it.
And he looks like he does have it on turn 2, but yeah, in this particular matchup, I really just don't like the Eidolon.
We're going to see if it's good here. James is going to start off with a Temple of Triumph, taking the top card. I believe that is a Magma Jet that he's looking at, consulting his hand before deciding where that is going to go. Stern with a Temple of Abandon, did his scrying. We'll see what he's got on the second turn as well. Again, this is just purely a race, just like it was in round 2, it will be in this round.
And it looks like James has a lot of lands. He's got 3 other lands in his hand, so I kind of like keeping the Magma Jet just because you want to make sure you don't draw any more lands. The red-white really hates when it starts to get flooded. So I think having that scry effect is really going to help him out. So just wants to make sure he just doesn't draw any more lands for the rest of the game.
Temple of Abandon number 2 comes into play here for Stern. There's a Mana Accelerant in the form of Elvish Mystic before passing the turn back. Tennant will take a draw. It's a copy of Magma Jet. Curious to see if he wants to fire that off at the Mystic, maybe go upstairs, or just deploy the Eidolon.
Yeah, in this situation, I mean, you really want to keep them off 4 mana. That's the key for them. And you could also mana screw your opponent. You don't know. But either way, I don't like just jamming out the Eidolon right there, just because you don't really know. If Zach just follows up with the Paul Kronos, then you're in really bad shape.
Both cards going to go to the bottom there for Tennant after the Magma Jet. So first burn spell does go to a creature, not the dome here for the red-white burn player. Stern going to play a Stomping Ground tapped and has another Mana Accelerator in the form of Sylvan Caryatid. So pretty good draw here for Stern as Tennant's going to take a card. It's a copy of Mutavault. And we're going to go to the skies, looks like with a Chandra's Phoenix.
So, yeah, like you said, Stern's got to be feeling pretty happy. He's got the Accelerant. It looks like he also has a fatty in the form of, I'm not sure if it's Paulo Kronos, but it looks like he definitely has Reaper of the Wilds in his hand.
Got 3 of those in his deck.
Yeah.
Not a mainstay in this deck.
Yeah, you don't. I think this is the first time we've seen Reaper of the Wilds in one of these builds.
In quite a while.
Yeah. So Zach deciding what he wants to do here. And yep, it looks like he's got a Golgari Charm, Reaper of the Wilds. It looks like the Gorkran Rampager as well, along with the Mutavault. So he has his choice of threats. I kind of like Reaper of the Wilds here. You just cast the Reaper of the Wilds, and then next turn you have Reaper of the Wilds plus Gorklan Rampager to pump it potentially. You can have mana up to give your guy Hexproof, but oh, it looks like he does have a Stormbreath Dragon in his hand. Did not see that one. So that's going to come into play here and drop James down to 16. So suddenly,
it's time to race.
Zach is the aggressor here.
Yeah, it is time to race.
And Red White Burn does not have many answers to Stormbreath Dragon. I mean, War Leader's Helix, Chain to the Rocks, they're 2 of their cards that they can deal with big fatty creatures. Unfortunately, the pro-white of Stormbreath Dragon being very problematic in this matchup.
And this is where you can see why Eidolon just isn't that great in this particular matchup. Like, he wasn't able, Tennant, to drop it on turn 2 when it's at its best, because he chose the Magma Jet. And if you can't drop it then, like, are you going to drop it now? Like, I assume that Stern is just going to play expensive spells outside of the range of it for the rest of the game.
Yeah, basically, it's going to hurt James more than it's going to hurt Zach. So I don't quite, yeah, and here we see the Eidolon. I think it's a foreign Eidolon, so we'll bring that up on the screen for you. It's one of the new cards in Born of the God that's gotten a lot of press. People are talking about it mostly for, legacy. Whenever a player casts a spell with converted mana cost of 3 or less, it deals 2 damage to that player. Basically like a pyrostatic pillar with legs. So, but pyrostatic pillar really didn't see that much play in legacy. So I don't really see this card making too much of an impact. Of course, being able to put it into play off of Aether Vial does have some appeal, but again, you're right. In this particular matchup, it's probably going to hurt James more than it really helps him.
Yeah, I just think the issue here is that I think Stern, again, is going to just be playing spells that cost more than 3 mana moving forward. We know he has Reaper of the Wilds in his hand, another dragon he would cast if he drew one. So, again, I think that, and you said it, Eidolon's probably going to deal James more damage than it's going to deal Zach. We'll see how it ends up playing out here. But even the 2/2 body can just be blocked by Caryatid as well. So, how good is it going to be? The chances are not great, but we'll see. As Stern, look, he's got an Overgrown Tomb. He's considered playing untapped right now, which would be a big win here for Tennant. So that's exactly what Stern's going to do.
I wonder what does he possibly want to have that mana for? I can understand, you can cast Reaper of the Wilds, but why would you want to cast Reaper and Sylvan Caryatid? Maybe he wants to have Golgari Charm mana up. But what do you really care about Golgari Charm?
I could also see the fact that he just wants to play Reaper and then have Sylvan Caryatid as a blocker, but I'm not sure if that's worth 2 life.
But yeah, you have 5 mana already, right?
But none of his lands down there are black, so he wants to be able to do this.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see
I'm not sure if that's worth 2 life, though.
Yeah, I'm still not sure it's worth 2 life, because what's the worst that happens? James cast a Chain to the Rocks, taking 3 damage or 2 damage, and then attacking you for 2. I mean, I think you're okay with that, given the fact that you have a Stormbreath in play.
There's the Reaper. Of course, it can't gain hexproof. And, maybe Stern wants to be able to leave the ability to do that as well by paying that 2 life. It's 12-12 right now as the burn player is going to untap. Of course, Stern is attacking for a bunch of damage, so, I mean, his life is pretty good right now, honestly. I'm not exactly sure who, is favored in this particular race, but, again, Eidolon makes things really, really hairy because those cheaper burn spells like Boros Charm are going to cost 2 life for Tennant.
Yeah, I really think that Eidolon's going to hurt him here. I mean, Zach, I think, is winning this race. He's got, because whenever you cast the spell, you take the damage.
Yep.
So even if you have damage and you're trying to draw the game or something, it's not going to work that way. As soon as you cast the spell, you're going to take the damage from the Eidolon.
The only one that kind of gets around this is Whirligig's Helix. That's it.
That's basically the only spell in his deck that doesn't shock him.
So now Tennant with the totals tied at 12. Gonna start by playing a Sacred Foundry. I wonder if he's gonna put the brakes on. He's gonna just attack for 2 in the air here. But you can tell he doesn't seem thrilled about his position as he puts Stern down to 10.
I wouldn't be surprised if Eidolon just jumps in front of that Reaper of the Wilds as fast as humanly possible.
And that might be okay. That might be an okay use for the card. Like just chump blocking something for a turn.
Yeah, but the turn he cast, though, he didn't really need to cast it because he wasn't really afraid of any attackers. So I might have just tried to get some of the burn out of my hand first. But either way, it does give him a blocker in case he needs it. Stormbreath Dragon, close to getting Monstrous here.
Only need 1 more mana.
Yeah, 1 more mana. Not sure if Zach has it. And we know he has that Golgari Charm, which isn't really that much of a factor right now. He has that Elvish Mystic as well, and a Sylvan Caryatid. So he's going to take damage if he casts any of the spells in his hand right now, so I'm not sure he really wants to do that.
I can't imagine he has a lot of interest in casting any of these.
So, Reaper of the Wilds and Stormbreath are going to come over.
I was curious if he was going to hold Stormbreath back to play defense, but I don't think defense is even close to reasonable right now.
Yeah.
I think you just keep pressing your advantage.
So here's the question. If you're James, do you block here? Yeah, you snap block, because you could have gone down to 4, but that would have meant that Zach really couldn't play any cheaper creatures to block your Mutavaults. But again, that means you can't cast any of the spells in your hand.
Yeah, so that's the bigger issue. Take a look at the top card here. Will Stern from the Scry trigger of Reaper of the Wilds.
So I think James is still pretty live here. I think he has maybe 2 burn spells in his hand. So if they're 2 3-damage burn spells, like Skull Crack and Lightning Strike, then he can drop Zach to 4. Chandra Phoenix can bring him down to 2, so he needs to top deck another burn spell, which he has plenty of in his deck.
Stern really taking a while to decide how he wants to scry here from the Reaper. Top card. It's going to go to the bottom. You see you mentioned he needs, 2 burn spells here that deal 3 points of damage. He does have a Strike and a Skull Crack in his hand. So that's actually pretty big.
Yeah, so Strike, Skull Crack, and Chandra's Phoenix, that's 8 damage. Golgari Charm could potentially throw off the math, but I still don't think it matters. Any burn spell in his deck should be able to do it.
Also, a nice thing here is that since Eidolon's off the table, Stern can actually deploy some spells.
Yeah.
He can play Caryatid and Elvish Mystic if he'd like, and still have access to the Golgari Charm. One of the reasons he may not want to play Mystic, though, is because of Searing Blood.
Yes, if that creature dies, he'll take 3 damage.
Yeah, because everything he has out right now is Searing Blood proof. That's actually mighty important. Here's 4 mana. There's a Lightning Strike. There is a Skull Crack. So Stern's down to 4.
Ladies and gentlemen,
so let's see here, James. So Zach is at 4 now. And let's see, even if he Golgari Charms to shrink the Chandra's Phoenix for a 1/1, he'll still go down to 3. So a burn spell could do it. Let's see what James draws here.
That is a Lightning Strike.
That should be able to do it, I believe. Let's see here. He can activate both his Mutavaults just to kind of put a little more pressure on Zach if he wants to.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessary.
It doesn't really need, doesn't really need to do that. He's just going to put 2 Caryatids in front of him anyway. So. if you're James, I mean, this is your line. This is you drew exactly what you wanted to draw.
Nothing changes now.
Nothing changes. Not sure what you're sometimes you hope you're so surprised that you actually drew the card you needed to draw that you kind of, wait a second, let me just make sure that I actually kill him here.
I mean, the only thing that matters here is unless we have the life totals wrong or if he's trying to play around a removal spell, that's really it.
Well, yeah, I think he's maybe, all right, I just want to see whether or not he has a Peach. But, like, you're going to attack. It's not like you're not going to attack, so we'll just attack and see.
Yeah. I mean, you do get to gain a little bit of information this way.
Yeah,
but your opponent has to have something. So.
Yeah, if you're Zach, you probably, I could see you casting Golgari Charm here, but you probably know that the only spell you're kind of keeping yourself out of range from is Shock, which these decks usually don't play. But either way, I still think it's probably correct.
There's a charm for -1/-1.
Make sure you have tax information on the
Yep, so he takes 1, goes to 3, and Lightning Strike should be lethal.
Yeah, and that's going to do it.
Wow, so great top deck there from James.
James may have been surprised, as you mentioned, that he actually did draw the card that gets the job done in that situation. That's why he's up a game right now with Red White Burn over Zach Stern playing Jund Monsters. We take a look at the sideboards here. I've got Stearns in front of me, so I'll begin by looking at 3 copies of Nylea's Disciple, an Abrupt Decay, 2 Sire of Insanity, 2 Ultimate Price, a Putrefy, Mizium Mortars, 2 Mistcutter Hydra, a Rakdos' Return, a Dreadbore, and a Golgari Charm. There's already 1 charm in the main deck. I actually kind of like the second one because destroying an enchantment against this deck does kill Satyr Fire Dancer. It kills Eidolon of the Great Revel. It kills Chain of the Rock. So you got to like that. Nylea's Disciple is pretty obvious as gaining life undoes cards here in this matchup. You got to like that as well. Decay can take care of a lot of the same things that Charm can. Also, Decay can take care of Chandra's Phoenix, so you got to like that. Outside of that, I mean, I have seen players board in Mistcutter Hydra in this matchup as just a large X threat to keep the damage racing going, so I can see those coming in as well. And there are plenty of cards to sideboard out in this matchup like Dominant Raid and Dreadbore. So.
Yeah. From James's side, again, Eidolon of the Great Revel is a card I do not like in this matchup. I would board that one out immediately. He also has 4 copies of Searing Blood, and I think you board this card out in the Jund Monsters matchup as well, because it really doesn't have a lot of targets. It can kill Elvish Mystic, and that's it. There's really nothing else. Maybe a Scavenger Goose if you get incredibly lucky. But so those are 8 cards I can see him boarding out. He's got plenty of options in his sideboard, though. He's got 3 copies of Satyr Fire Dancer, which obviously can be pretty effective in this matchup with cards like Skullcrack and Boros Charm. He's got 2 Harness by Force, which is a new card that we've kind of seen in Born of the Gods, kind of like a threat in effect. 2 Chain to the Rocks, so allows him to deal with Polychronos. But again, Chain to the Rocks might not be that effective against a deck with Abrupt Decay, and it can really only deal with Polychronos. Yeah. I mean, that's really the only card. So I'm not quite sure if you want to board in more Chain to the Rocks. I definitely like bringing in Mizium Mortars because obviously Stormbreath Dragon is a major threat. And he does have a Dictator of the Twin Gods, and we saw in the video against with Chris Van Meter losing to that card. It does have the potential to blow out occasionally, but I'm not quite sure I'm sold on that card. I mean, if you have it in your sideboard, it's probably for like a matchup like this, I guess, maybe, I don't know.
It's there for a reason.
But, I mean, we did see a Jund Monsters deck lose to Dictator of the Twin Gods in the best of SCG video, so I will assume it's coming in.
Philip Fortner is the one that did the dirty deed, so against Chris Van Meter. We'll see if it does come in again here for James Tennant. And if you guys are just joining us, we do appreciate it. Senator Phillips, Osip Lebanovich, Star City Games Open Series here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Round 10 of 10 is where we're at. We've got one more round to cover today. That'll be the quarterfinals of our Standard Open. Of course, tomorrow we've got our Legacy Open. And if you guys want to interact with us on Twitter at SCG Live, hashtag SCGINDY all weekend long, as we make our way through another fantastic weekend of Magic here. 2 weeks away from the Season 2 Invitational. That means 2 weeks away from 2 more players punching their ticket to the Star City Games Players Championship at the end of the year in Roanoke, Virginia.
It's pretty exciting. And Chris Van Meter sitting at the top.
It looks like he's going to be good to go. I mean, another top 8 here. Rill dropped out of the tournament at X3. That was the closest competitor. He's going to expand his lead this weekend by at least 10 more points or something like that. So I think it's going to be, it's almost impossible now. And, you know, to Van Meter's credit, you know, these past 2 weeks have been great for him. Losing the finals and then running off another 8-0 this weekend. He's been incredible with the deck.
Yeah, he's been really good. And I think he's certainly influenced this metagame. You're seeing a lot of Jund Monsters decks. Zach Stern here at 8-1. wouldn't be surprised if he read some of the articles that Chris has been writing about, because Chris has not only been, winning with the deck, he's been writing about the deck pretty consistently week in and week out.
Yeah, and he's also been kind of documenting like the minor tweaks and changes he's been making to the deck. I remember when he went from 4 coursers to 3, that was a minor tweak. He tried Bo Nylea, I think 2 weeks ago, maybe last weekend, as a way to get better against Burn. He realized that, Nylea's Disciple was just a better card at what he was looking for, since that one can attack, stuff like that. So, Bo is only good in a certain circumstance, and plus they can have answers to it, like a wear and tear, things like that. So, he's been really just kind of melding the deck for some time now.
Yeah, and I think it's really, it's articles like that can get you really appreciate the kind of impact that someone who's a really good writer could have in a format, because it kind of reminds me of Zvi Malshowitz's My Fire series, where he built this really, really good, solid build of Fire. It's a very popular deck, and he wrote a really lengthy article series just about that deck. Talking about how all his feelings on it, how you play out the matchups, specific card choices, and it really warped the format. I mean, it basically changed the way everyone thought about this, one of the most popular decks in the format. So I think what Chris is doing is something very similar. I mean, Jund Monsters is a deck that I think a lot of people had probably their own opinions of, but I think Chris's success and how detailed he is in terms of outlining, his specific thoughts around certain cards and his feelings on certain matchups has really helped people kind of, one, either adopt the deck and make it their own, or two, kind of think, what, this deck could be a contender now. Maybe I should be playing it more.
Yeah, I think it's changed the opinion of a lot of people.
Yeah. So both players opening up with their 7-card hand. It looks like they're okay with it. And Zach Stern's leading off here.
Temple of Abandon going to leave that top card on top. Tennant going to take a draw. This is a wild guess.
Ugh, my least favorite card.
The camps are certainly split. Some players love it, like Tyler Wynn with his win in Knoxville with the card. Others do not like it, like the person to my right here in the booth.
In fairness, I really have no reason to not like that card. I just, for some reason, do. I don't know. I can't really explain it. Just don't like it.
A Mutavault plus a Scavenging Ooze. That's an important one here. Tennant needs to get that off of the table sooner than later, as that can provide it can become a real issue.
Yeah, right now there's no creatures in the graveyard, and there are unlikely to be any until James decides to start killing stuff. So he could choose to kill it now, but it looks like he's just going to cast that Wild Guess.
Discarding a copy of Mana Confluence, draws 2 new cards, among them a Sacred Foundry. The other one was a War Leader's Helix, and simply does pass the turn back over to Stern, who will draw a card. It is another copy of Scavenging Ooze.
So Stern's got a pretty good hand there. It looks like he's got Courser of Crufix as well. Although he will have to take 2 damage if he wants to get into play this turn. I kind of like actually just attacking with Savage Ooze and maybe playing a second Ooze here instead of taking 2.
I'm okay with that. Like, play the second Ooze, play the Overrun Tomb tap, and just pass the turn.
Yeah, there's no reason. I think you want to just make sure you don't. You're still going to be able to develop your board a little bit, but you don't take damage here. So, yeah, that's exactly what he does. He's just going to play second Ooze, and he can play the Courser next turn and then reveal and maybe play a land off of it. So.
And this card is so good in this matchup that these are spells that Tennant actually needs to use removal on.
Yeah.
And he'd rather just the burn go upstairs to Stern's head, but I think that Ooze is so good in the matchup that it's worth just, you probably are forced to kill it. Like, you don't want to, but you probably have to.
Yeah, he doesn't have that much creature removal. He's got Chain to the Rocks, Mizzy Mortis, and that one card is Boros Charm. I think are those War Leader Helixes at the end?
Yeah, he's got at least one.
So yeah, he's got looks like a couple of War Leaders Helixes. So he actually could just send everything to the face. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising. Obviously, without any creatures in the graveyard, Scavenging Ooze is just a 2/2. He's got a Mutavault now, so yeah, he might be able to try to buy a little bit of time until he can overload that Mizzy Mortars. I think he might have enough time. With double Helix, I think he's certainly not in the worst shape here.
He's got lands 4 and 5. He's only 1 land away from actually having that be a realistic possibility.
Yeah, I think he has to really start thinking about that. Maybe even you could use Chain to the Rocks maybe now to just slow things down a little bit, knowing that your turn 4 and 5 is probably going to be Helix. And then turn 6, hopefully, is Overload Mortars.
The one thing about the burn deck, because you saw him play a Mutavault, like if his plan was to just do what you mentioned, which is to Chain to the Rocks and then Helix, like now he might be forced to take 2 damage where he shouldn't, right?
Oh yeah, that's a major mistake there. Yeah, he should definitely play the Sacred Foundry over the Mutavault.
And the point I was going to make is that with the burn deck, because everything is so sensitive and you basically kill your opponent with like your last card every game, and your life total is at like 1 or whatever. Every game is just razor thin close. You can't afford to make a minor mistake like that.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is maybe James was thinking of jumping in front of a Scavenging Ooze with Mutavault, but that just seems like a terrible play. I can't imagine wanting to do that. So I'm with you. I think you have to play the Sacred Foundry there because the games are so thin. The margin of error is so small here. It always comes down to 1 or 2 life points, and you can make the same play you're making with a Sacred Foundry into play tap, but you don't need to play the Mutavault. So,
Chargers Phoenix to draw this turn.
So now
I don't know if that changes things. Or not.
I still don't know if you could afford to play the Challenger's Phoenix here, just in case Zach does have a removal, and then he's able to eat it with the Scavenging Ooze. You might want to just play the Sacred Foundry. Unfortunately, go to 12, and then just go Helix, and maybe use that Challenger's Phoenix as like a pseudo burn spell later in the game. Again, this decision would have been a lot easier if that Foundry was already in play. So it looks like he is just going to deploy a Phoenix here.
And the attack for 2 is going to put Stern at 14. We are, I'll say it in quotes, we are tied. It is definitely a tie game right now. But things are getting pretty ugly. And it also doesn't even mention that Courser, if it finds a land, and it just did in Blood Crypt, that's where things get really difficult too.
Yeah, so now it looks like he can find the land, and now he can actually get a Polychronos into play.
He also has another Courser in his hand, and if he cares about keeping his life total really high, he can just play the other Courser and then play the Blood Crypt in game 2 and go to 16 and undo the work that the Phoenix just did.
Yeah, I love that play actually, because if you attack for 6, you're dropping James down to 8, and that's 8 is on board right now. So you have lethal, plus you have a Gorklan Rampager in your hand.
And you have a Mutavault in play.
Yeah, so yeah, I like that play a lot more. You're just going to boost your life total a little bit, make sure you don't lose to any random burn spells.
It's kind of interesting, like, you take a look at the Jund Monsters deck. This is a deck that has Temples, and it has a lot of Ravnical dual lands in Blood Crypt and Overgrown Tomb and Stomping Ground. So you would think that this matchup might be pretty bad for Jund Monsters. At least that's what I initially thought. After watching the match earlier between Bernal and Fogel, and now watching this one, it doesn't really seem bad for the Jund Monsters deck at all.
Well, it really comes down, like Corsair Crufix really kind of helps things out. I mean, it gives you a durable body, plus it allows you to gain life every turn, continue to make your land drop so you don't, because one of the ways you can lose to this deck is if you stumble on mana. So Corsair plays a huge role, obviously. We're seeing that here. And I think in the last match, too, that we saw when Jund Monsters won, it really came down to Corsair Crufix playing a big role. So.
Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, James Tennant is up a game. He did win the last game, so it's not like, this attack for lethal. And that's it. John Stern's on to the elimination rounds. That's not what's happening here.
It took a top deck, though.
It did.
It
did. Here comes the Phoenix again. It's going to put Stern down to 14. Warleader's Helixes look like they may get fired off. And the other thing that you did mention that I think is really important here is that Mizzing Immortals with Overload is a very realistic possibility in this game.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think Zach does have a Rampager. So even the Helix, unless the Helix goes after a Courser before combat, I think he should be dead this turn. I think James's plan is probably just Warleader's Helix your face and try to win the race that way. Unfortunately, that's just not going to work here.
Force is going to come in. It's going to put Stern back up to 16. And yeah, it's because of the Rampager. We haven't even really mentioned the oozes. Like, when the Rampager gets blood rushed, the Rampager's in the graveyard, ooze can gain a life, become a 3/3. There's a lot of different things that make this really, really difficult for Tennant to win.
Yeah, I think James's best play is to probably just Warleader's Helix a Courser prior to combat, and then try to win with Overload Mizzing Mortars, but again, that's not going to be a factor right now. Gorklan Rampager, he could Blood Rush anything. James is at 8, so he's going to have to cast a Warleader's Helix before damage goes on the stack even. So James is thinking about what he wants to do here. Again, the pressure, the priority is on him. Zach's attacking for 8 damage. He doesn't have to do anything else.
Nope, not a single move needs to be made.
James could be thinking about maybe activating a Mutavault here, but I can't imagine it's not just a Warleader's Helix. He's probably just realized that, oh wow, I could just die to a Gorklan Rampager here.
And if he has to send a Warleader's Helix at a creature, Gorklan Rampager blows that up too.
Yeah, so again, I think it came down to, you're right, like that third turn where he played a Mutavault instead of just Sacred Foundry and casting Chain to the Rocks. He's going to lose this game with a Chain to the Rocks in his hand.
And a Mortars.
And a Mortars, yeah. Again, if he was able to Chain to the Rocks that creature, I think the plan actually works. I think the Helix mortars your team plan would have actually been a reasonable strategy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he took too much damage.
And I think Tennant is, as you mentioned, coming to the exact same conclusion that you and I are here in the booth is, well, I have to probably Helix either him or something. And yet here's a Gore Clan Rampage to just completely annihilate that strategy. And now he's got to pick up the rest of his permanents. So Zach Stern is going to tie things up here with Jund Monsters over James Tennant and his red-white burn deck. We're going to head, to a third and final game between these two players. Winner of this match will be playing the elimination rounds later this evening.
Zach's got to be feeling pretty good. I mean, he pretty much dominated that game. And James, though, is going to be on the play. Obviously, a Fire Dancer could really be huge here because there were several spells in his hand that would have been great. If he had a Fire Dancer in play, all of a sudden, this game's over, basically. He had a Boros Charm. He had a Skull Crack. So the whole game is different if that Satyr Fire Dancer is in play. But Zach now is going to be on the draw. Still, he needs to get, it's all going to come down to Corsair or Krufix, I think. I think that card is really the key for this matchup. Or if he could just get like an early Polychronos into play. That's usually how these Jund decks win. Turn 2 Sylvan Carroted, turn 3 Fatty, and then I can win the race usually just because you don't have resilient threats that are attacking me each turn.
See both players going back to the drawing board really quickly here. Tennant just took out a wear and tear out of his deck. Maybe doesn't feel like he needs that. Looks like he's sideboarding a couple cards out. Maybe he's sideboarding a couple cards back in. Maybe a little second guessing of themselves, given they may have seen some new cards at this point. Maybe a little nerves as well. Both these players playing for the top 8 later this evening. Again, whoever wins this one could very easily be, one of the top 3 seeds and be on the play all the way throughout the top 8. So.
Yeah, wear and tear just doesn't seem like a good card in this matchup. Obviously, it can kill Corsair, but the thing is, in this matchup, we've talked about how close the games are. You can't afford to have dead cards.
Yeah.
You need to. The only way Red White Burn is going to win is if they're able to use every single one of their cards as efficiently as possible.
Yep.
Like they have to maximize their mana every turn, and they have to make sure that they end the game with no cards in their hand. And you can't do that if you have dead cards like wear and tear. You're probably in good shape if your opponent doesn't have Corsair, but that doesn't help you against the draws of turn 2 Carroted, turn 3 Polychronos, and you got to wear and tear your hand.
Well, we're going to be underway in game 3 here in just a moment. The only person that we know is locked up, Chris Van Meter. 8-0-1 with Jund Monsters. Likely drew this round. Don't think there was any dream crushing to be done. I know he wants the #1 seed and be able to actually shave that beard, but the dream is certainly alive for him and those clippers that he brought with him all the way from Roanoke.
And let me ask you, how good do you think he must be feeling with 2 weeks left until the Invitational, and he's on this insane run in Standard? He's got to be feeling pretty good about his chances of making top 8 at that Invitational.
Yeah, I got to think so. There's not a new set coming out between now and then. So, the Standard portion he's got to unlock. Again, the Invitational is a dual format tournament. As we all know, Legacy and Standard. This particular Invitational, the Standard will be the top 8. However, for Chris, he's got to find a Legacy deck to play.
Yeah, and I think if Chris goes into it thinking, okay, I could probably 7-1 Standard pretty easily, given my track record. All I need to do is find a consistent Legacy deck. And, there's no more consistent Legacy deck than Esper Blade. So if I was Chris, I'd probably just spend the next 2 weeks testing a deck like Esper Blade or, some sort of traditional, Rug Delver, Bug, Esper Blade, one of those types of decks, something with Brainstorm in it, I don't think he wants to go in playing a Tezzeret deck like that we've seen before. I mean, I don't know. I know he loves that deck, but I think if I have such a dominating understanding of a Standard, and I think I can 7-1 a format, I'm not going to take that many chances with Legacy.
So he's tried some Delver decks over the past couple of weeks, and he got really frustrated because he was just losing to Painter decks that have been Blood Mooning him.
Mm-hmm.
And he, obviously when Blood Moon gets in play against these Delver decks, they can't function for the most part unless they're already out and ahead, and it's just this is so frustrating to lose this way. But I mean, that's part of what makes Painter appealing in Legacy. Yeah. So you see Stern is going to take a mulligan here while Tennant's going to keep his opening hand. And that I could definitely see the frustration there, but at the same time, those are arguably the most powerful decks in the format. Those Delver strategies, or as you mentioned, Esper, Stoneblade, or Deathblade, or whatever you want to call it, or whichever version you want to play. So, yeah, Brainstorm might be the key to his success.
I think there's something to be said about playing a deck that you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
I would never tell him, hey, you should just pick up elves,
Sure.
Or you should pick up ants, but. I just think that if I was him, given how good he is in Standard right now, he's on such a heater, you have to be confident in that portion. Just play something on Legacy that's you're not going to lose to yourself. You know, the deck's not just going to just do something crazy or lose to itself, because that's not, you don't want to go in 7-1 standard and 4-4 Legacy. Like, that's just the worst feeling. And we kind of saw that with Sam Black at the last Invitational. I think he went like 8-0 in standard.
Yeah, he went 8-0 with Mono Blue.
Yeah, and then he went like 4-4, 3-5 in Legacy.
Yeah, why would he ever lose with Mono Blue?
Yeah.
What, are you kidding?
So Zach Mulligan's here. It looks like he might have to mulligan again. Jeez.
Oh, boy.
Yes, James is keeping his 7-card hand. No worse feeling than having to mulligan twice when you're playing for top 8 in game 3.
I'd say he picked a bad time, but he didn't really pick it. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, so these things just happen. You never really pick when you're going to mulligan.
Yeah, now's a good time to mold 5. No one has ever said that before.
So James feeling pretty happy right now.
Pretty hard not to.
And I'd say this is probably the hardest part for me in Magic, is trying to control my giddiness in this situation.
Okay.
Because obviously you don't want to start like pumping the fist and smiling, but James has to be pretty happy. You're playing for top 8, you're on the play in game 3, and your opponent is mulliganing to 5.
There are worse spots to be in.
Worst spots to be in.
Yeah. There are definitely worse places to be in life.
I actually practice my somber face in the mirror, like oh man, that stinks, bro. I'm so sorry. You have to practice that face in the mirror, because you really don't want to, like, first of all, you don't want to think that you're going to win before you win.
Of course,
I mean,
of course.
There's still a game to be played here, and crazier things have happened.
Yeah. I played a match, and Stephen Mann's actually here. I played a match in the finals of a casual draft. 3v3 at Pro Tour Dragon's Maze.
Mm-hmm.
It was the 9th match, game 3. Steve Mann mulligan to 4. And me and my team were just like, yeah, we did it. We win the draft. He killed me on turn 4. In limited.
In limited.
Yeah, he killed me on turn 4. Flux Charger plus Assault Armed Dangerous. He flipped it and double striked and killed me. Yep.
So Zach actually, not an unreasonable hand. He's got Stomping Ground and Elvish Mystic, along with the Mizium Mortars and a Scavenging Ooze. So he could get something going here. It depends on whether or not there's a land on top of his deck.
It was turn 5, excuse me. But either way, Stomping Ground and an Elvish Mystic. Someone will correct me out there, but it was turn 5.
So if I'm James and I have a way to kill that elf, that is the first thing I'm doing.
I would agree. Ooh, it doesn't look like he's got the Eidolon in his hand.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe that's still in the deck. Eidolon comes down, it's going to be pretty good
here.
It's
good. It's good in this game, right? Where the opponent mulliganed a bunch and doesn't have a lot of options, and is probably a little stuck on mana. You might have to Mizium Mortars that. His hand is actually pretty good. Like, he's got a Mortars for the Eidolon. You take 2 to get that thing off the table, but it's going to deal 2 to you either way. Like, it's either going to deal 2 to you attacking or 2 to you casting a spell. So I can see just Mortarsing that. And then he's got a Scavenging Ooze to follow up with, so.
Yeah, the thing is if you can actually just kill the Eidolon right now and then just run a runner into land, you can actually make the Ooze a 3/3, maybe even a 4/4.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to cast the Ooze right away. You want to get a little value out of it.
I mean, this isn't the most exciting play, of course. Mortarsing an Eidolon, but I mean, you got to do what you got to do. Here's a Wild Guess. Discard a Phoenix. Draw 2. It's a Lightning Strike and a Mountain.
So James now has 3 mana. That should give him pretty much what he needs. He does have a War Leader Helix, but this deck can function pretty well on 3 mana.
I think that was a Temple of Abandon. It is. It's time to scry. Let's see if Stern can find black mana. That top card looks like maybe going to the bottom. He's going to consider his options first really quickly.
Yeah, and at this point, if you're Zach, you probably just have to cast the Ooze here, just because if James does have a burn spell, you'd rather him killing your Ooze than your Elvish Mystic in case you draw a land, so you can just get that Reaper that was in play.
No.
An unchecked Reaper is probably one of the few ways that you can win in this particular spot.
I think you got to cast the Ooze right now.
Yeah, I don't think you can try to be cute. Like, you have to try to redirect any burn away from that Elvish Mystic.
Chain of the Rocks at the draw.
Ooh, so that's a good draw. That's going to kind of turn off one of Zach's ways to win. So James still not able to do too much right here. Looks like he's going to cast Chain to the Rocks, possibly on a Scavenging Ooze. And he could actually cast Boros Charm, targeting Zach. Oh, so he only has 1 white, so he can. So Chain to the Rocks is going to come down, and he can Lightning Strike Zach in order to get back to Chandra's Phoenix if he wants.
Yeah, I could definitely see an argument for just lightning striking that Mystic. Just get that thing off the table.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to lose to Polychronos, especially because you just use a Chain to the Rocks. So, yeah, thankfully Zach did not draw a land, so James is not going to get punished for that. But, yeah, Zach's hand is pretty bad right here. He's got double Reaper Wilds and Stormbreath Dragon, which just aren't going to hit play.
Also, like in this situation, if you're 10, you also have to think about, okay, what can my opponent be holding on their mulligan to 5? Now he's going to lightning strike this off the table. A little risky to do it there. Like, I think it's in the turn, so like Rampager can't be a thing at that point. But, you know, if you're going to do that, if that's the line you're committed to, you do that before the turn even happens.
Yeah.
Because if your opponent just draws a land and plays Polychronos, like, the game is just much different than it needs to be. Either way, it doesn't come back to hurt Tennant here, but, you know, maybe for the future, as it looks like he may be on his way to the elimination rounds, that could certainly be a thing that does come up. And here comes the Phoenix into the red zone against Stern.
Abrupt Decay gets drawn, but then he doesn't have any black mana, so he can't even cast that. So now Chandra's Phoenix, along with a bunch of burn spells in James's hand. Zach falls down now to 12. So I think James has enough burn to potentially kill him next turn.
That's an Ilea's Disciple. It's another one that can't be cast.
Wow. So pretty unfortunate situation here for Zach.
There's a War Leader's Helix. Turn's going to go down to 8. Tennant's going to go up to 23. And it's only a matter of time now as the Phoenix is going to go back to the grip there for Tennant.
Yeah, and Tennant doesn't even need that Phoenix. He's got Boros Charm and Skullcrack, I believe, in his hand. So it looks like Zach might die this turn.
I think Zach's turn is saying, just show it to me. Let me see 2 more. I think we've all been here before against Burn.
Yeah.
Just waiting to be finished off. Here's a Phoenix. In for 4 we go.
Zach goes down to 3 here, or 4. And yep, Boros Charm.
Boros Charm. And that is going to do it. James Tennant is going to win this match over Zach Stern 2-1, and he'll be moving on to our elimination rounds here in Indianapolis.
So